Men of Reddit, what are the struggles of dating a very rich girl? This is probably gonna get buried, but I've always wanted to write it out. I was never sure how rich she was. I just knew her family had property in a couple places in the US and China. And this is also how I found out property in China is dumb expensive. When she went for the holidays, if she wanted to say, stay in Shanghai, and then go to Beijing later, she didn't have to look at hotels or Airbnb, she just had to make sure she grabbed the right set of keys. It was weird. She wasn't dripping with designer clothes and drove a fuel-efficient compact, but just looking at where her family had apartment/houses, I can only imagine. She was a super sweet, down-to-earth girl. Biggest heart in the world, very hardworking, and acted like a child in a candy shop everywhere she went. I think the biggest strain came when we would eat together. For me, money was tight, and the best way to stretch my college scholarship money was to cook meals in bulk. Before she met me, she ate out literally every single meal. At first, it took some adjusting and rebudgeting. Bless her heart, she understood and found compromises. She loved my cooking and would surprise me with groceries and then say I have to pay her back by cooking whatever she wanted. Every once in a while she'd pick up the entirety of a bill that we were supposed to split, but she always found a way to make sure I didn't feel down about it. I don't think she ever once bought me an expensive gift. Most things were either handmade or were very thoughtful. For example, shoes had been eating for months but couldn't afford, and she noticed them in my computer browser. I miss that girl. I hope she's doing well. Pretending to pull out your wallet when it's time to pay for anything, then asking, are you sure? I dated a pretty rich girl. Her dad was a prominent lawyer, her mom a successful artist, and her uncle was a 1980s pop star. Honestly, they were great people to be around. They were old money, and not snotty or overly pretentious. Yes, they had a big ass old house and drove quality, not overly flashy, cars. Yes, they had whatever they wanted, but not at all in a look at me type way. I on the other hand was dirt poor. I mean, in the early 90s grunge was a blessing for me, because I looked like that already. But her parents didn't care, and were always very welcoming. Her mom even took me to my first punk show. I guess it's true when they say cash screams and wealth whispers. My girlfriend, now wife, wasn't rich herself, but had very rich parents, both lawyers, one in family law, the other in corporate counsel, but they were pretty normal during her upbringing. The law careers and massive salaries came when she was a teenager. The toughest thing was that her parents would offer to pay for nearly anything, but later try to use that as leverage to control her when they didn't like what she was doing. She was college aged, so it happens a bit. Parents and teenagers aren't perfect. Things like stop paying for her car suddenly, or reneging on a trip that they offered to pay for and she booked, and was suddenly on the hook for the cost. It was certainly toxic from their end, and she kept falling for it each time. However, in her 20s, once she was out of college and employed, she didn't need their money, so anything that was offered with strings attached, or had the potential to do that, she could just decline. They learned pretty quickly that manipulation via finances isn't a good way to foster a relationship with your daughter in her 20s. Her mom figured it out, her dad not so much. For unrelated reasons they got divorced, and her relationship is still very strained with her dad. I dated a senator's daughter in high school. Everything was about keeping up appearances, and we had to be careful where we went in public and stuff like that. Her parents offered to get me nicer clothes to wear when we went to dinner in public, but I felt weird about it. Relationship didn't last long. I'm not good at being political. Keeping up with her. She wanted to go on European trips, expensive vacations, expensive restaurants, etc. She made very good money, and I was limited in my funds, and had to spread it out. I couldn't just fly to the Caribbean at the drop of a hat. So, in turn, she left me for a guy who could. Edit. Wow, that took off. I wasn't expecting to hear from so many people. Thanks you all. The thing is that I have money, a great career, etc. We dated for 2+ years, and had a great time while together, and did a lot stuff. As a matter of fact, she was probably the best GF I had ever had, but the underlying thing was that no matter what I always felt this feeling of not being enough. She doubled my salary, if not a little more, in the six figures. In the end she admitted to wishing I had more financial freedom, and that it bothered her. It hurt like hell to hear something so personally insulting from someone I loved. So she found someone who was in her tax bracket, so to speak. I dated a girl from a wealthy family when I was in college, and I was very poor. The most frustrating thing for me was that our definition of a crisis was so different. From month to month I would literally not know whether I could afford my rent or be able to put gas in my car, and she would be freaking out about some, to me, minor social issue, or whether a store carried a fashion brand she liked. It definitely made things difficult, and I had to remember that it's your perspective that dictates what is a crisis and what isn't. It was honestly a lesson I've tried to remember over the years. If you're coming from a very poor family, as was my case, expect a lot of butting of heads when it comes to financial issues. I was raised very poor. Now I make a decent amount of money, but if I'm ever in a situation where I have a lot of expenses and may run into financial issues, I tend to panic a little bit and plan my spending extremely carefully. My wife came from a wealthy family and she never had to deal with financial struggles at any point in her life, and she doesn't quite care about spending a lot of money. Basically she doesn't think past the fact that we can afford something. She doesn't think about possibly needing money in the future, and that's where we always butt heads. In short, make sure you ask her to let you know before she spends more than X amount. That was the solution we came up with, and it has actually saved us from a lot of financial trouble. I married one. Nothing to do with my wife at all. She's a gem. It's my Mills expectations and image are always the center of just about every single decision. Phil, the real rich person, is cool as hell, though. I dated a girl in college that came from a very wealthy family. Texas oil money. Like, she flew from Dallas to Florida, where we went to school, in her dad's business jet. That kinda rich. I think the biggest thing for me was how out of touch she was with everyday money issues. For example, someone smashed into my car in the parking lot, and I was totally upset about it. She was like, "It's okay, you can just get a new one." She had no concept of how insurance or deductibles work, and she didn't understand that I could not simply go out and get it fixed right away. Another example was that she wanted me to go to Miami to see a U2 concert with her. She had like front row tickets. I couldn't go because I had to work. She didn't understand that my boss would not give a ***T about how cool it would be to see U2. This was before they sucked. She was always doing something. Constantly going on trips, or to the openings of expensive restaurants, or traveling to her parents' vacation house, or getting tickets for some opening night or something. It was frankly exhausting. She had money and she wanted to spend it, and I just couldn't keep up. I say had, because it was entirely her parents' money. She was in grad school, though she was struggling at it, and otherwise had absolutely no work or experience. Outside of a restaurant, she barely had any life experience either. Admitting financial struggles. When my wife and I were dating in university, her family invited me up to their cottage during the break between Christmas and New Year's to ski, skate and otherwise play in the snow. I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to ski and had no outdoor clothing appropriate to be out in the snow. No ski jacket, pants, or boots. I declined the invitation, but my then girlfriend was really sad and asked why. I had to admit I didn't have the gear needed, and I couldn't afford them. She then passed it on to her family, and when I visited them on Christmas Day, they led me to a room with 3 types of everything new with tags laid out on a bed for me to choose from. It was a wonderful gesture, but I had mixed feelings. I appreciated the gear very much, but I felt like a charity case. Also, managing expectations of my wife for travel and expectations with children's activities. She was used to jetting away whenever they felt like it, and had her own horses growing up. That's just not an option for us. We do okay and we're happy, but horses are not financially viable. I lived in a pretty rich area of the Bay Area. My GF at the time was very rich for this already wealthy area, but she truly had no concept of money. Her budget was $12,000 a month. Her family bought her a brand new Porsche because her car was 5-year-old BMW M5. It was honestly like dating an alien. Any issues I had in everyday life were just so far out of her life experience. Edit. She had a trust fund that paid out $12,000 a month. Edit 2. If I had $10 for every person asking if she is single still, and if they could have her number one would have a trust fund of my own that pays out $12,000 a month. Let me tell a story that I think will provide a nice contrast to the majority of the comments here. This story isn't mine, but that of a close friend's brother. So Joe went away to college and met Sarah there halfway through freshman year. They were on again off again for a few months before deciding to date seriously in junior year. They met each other's families on vacation or when they would come to visit their kids at school. By all accounts Sarah's family was polite and nice and relatively laid back. Not a whiff of arrogance or anything like that. Fast forward to the end of senior year. Joe's paternal grandfather is on his deathbed and Joe desperately wants to go say goodbye. However, they go to school in a small town with a private airport, think Cessnas, and the closest major airport is several hours away by car, and neither of them have a car. Said airport also didn't have a direct flight, so it would have been pushing 24 hours until he got to the hospice center to see his grandfather. This was destroying Joe, as he and Grandpa were very close, and he was essentially a second father to him. Without a word Sarah pulled Joe into a cab and took him to the airport. Waiting for them was Sarah's family's private plane. Joe and my friend and her family were all astounded. They had no idea Sarah's family was wealthy, and especially not private plane wealthy. Anyways, off Joe went, and he said goodbye and he flew coach back to school. Sarah never said a word about it one way or the other and neither did Joe. They are now married and both doing well in their careers, and from what I can tell live a very normal life. But every once in a while they disappear off to some remote island or jungle or mountain for a few days a year and on to anyone but their family where they're going. Everything was about the family's image. Everything. Didn't last long. I was an aspiring lawyer and she an aspiring artist. She came from a rich family and I grew up in a bad social economic area. My parents were refugees back in the 70s. Basically never knew how rich she was until I went to her hometown for her brother's wedding. Apart from the amazing apartment her parents had, they had an empty apartment in the downtown area for guests that I could sleep in. Easily the fanciest place I've stayed at. Oh, and her older brother, that was in the family business, had to go to the factories they owned to do something. Relationship started to take a hit when her dad blamed me for his daughter's dreams of being an artist. I only made her believe in herself and to choose her destiny herself instead of letting her parents force her into the family business. She changed her major from business management to art without me knowing, and her parents freaked out and blamed me for it. I couldn't really handle the drama and law school, so we ended things. Last time I checked her out she was in an art school somewhere in Europe. Seems like she's still living the dream. Edit. Just to clarify, I didn't wanna break a happy home or anything. My ex had severe anxiety and depression about her major that her parents chose for her. She was never happy at uni and that's why we talked about her choosing her own life. Second edit. Wow, this blew up. Never watch the movies people are typing as comments. Seems like a lot of movies have the same premise as my story and people umming me telling me I'm lying. I'm really not. I didn't wanna put out too many details cause I don't wanna out me or her in some way. In the end you believe what you want to believe. Nothing. There was literally nothing wrong with dating a rich girl when I was poor back in college. I had a good major, was an athlete, and her family loved me. I didn't have money to give her flashy gifts, and she didn't care. If she wanted a Birkin, she'd just shop with her mom. I didn't have money to take her on fancy vacations or trips. We'd just go skiing at her parents' condo, and I could always find a way to scrape up some money to get myself there and everything else would be taken care of. They didn't care that I wasn't an appropriate sweeter at the time. I was just a college kid and must have done a nice enough job of presenting myself that they knew we'd figure it out. It was an awesome relationship, one of the least stressful relationships imaginable. We eventually fell out of love for other reasons, but I look back on that time fondly, and we ended things amicably. Still on good terms with the family too. The feeling that you'll always be living on the coattails of the family, rather than making your own way in the world. I can't say very rich, but my wife and I definitely come from different socioeconomic castes. Her family was upper middle class, and mine was just above poverty level. She just didn't understand the panic I felt when money was running low. She didn't know the dread you get when your car starts making a strange noise and you know you can't afford to fix it. For her, everything would work out because she had parents with money to swoop in and make it all better. In short, she never understood the struggle and wasn't very smart with her money. It's not even that she wasn't smart, it's that she wasn't the same sort of ingenious that poor people are with stretching every penny. Eventually, we both got decent jobs and managed to put back a good savings, and we both grew to understand each other's money habits. She had no self-realization of our financial differences and how that means experiences in our lives are drastically different. She lives in Texas and would fly to New York City for the weekend, go to Hawaii, California or Florida on a whim. When she asked me what I wanted, I was always really major, because that's how I live. I don't need the most expensive item, but for her, that was all or nothing. Eventually she learned to respect and almost envy my way of living. She enjoyed my simple life, but then it turned out she was a total sociopath, so she may not be the best example of dating a rich girl either. When people weren't gifting her things, she would just use her dad's black credit card to get it. She was a very selfish woman. I guess I had a different type than everyone else. We worked together, and you wouldn't know she was rich unless you really got to know her. She worked as a diversion, something to do, and meet new people. She never looked at the price of anything, had a $5,000 watch, Dolce & Gabbana glasses she would break at least once a month cause she's clumsy. Very humble, very sweet, and probably the hardest worker there. We were managers. The issue was that there was absolutely nothing we could do together that was new to her. She had more money and free time. Her bucket list was completed by 22. There was nothing new or fresh within my, I don't know the word, realm, ability. We got along great, and I found out from a mutual friend she was excited to be with someone not using her or groveling cause she was F***KU levels of rich. It was my pride, I think, that ruined it. Nothing she did. I had issues letting her pay for everything, and I was unable to show her anything she hadn't seen. I stopped being fun because I couldn't wow or impress her, and it got in my head. She was perfectly happy doing normal things, but it wasn't enough for me. I had to impress her. Gift giving during holidays/birthdays. Being given a $600 camera while I give you a $50 purse or equivalent gift sucks a lot. Edit. Not rich but more than middle class. Meeting the people she knows. It's hard to talk about my average self when my audience is a collection of some of the most gifted, driven, accomplished people I've come across. For instance, the first friends she introduced me to, one had temporarily quit healthcare, traveled the world making a documentary, and then spent 6 months delivering healthcare in some third world country, returning a few weeks before we met. And the other had entered into sports journalism and is very quickly climbing the ladder to one of the most reputable newspapers of the nation. After hearing them share these interesting stories about each other, it came to me. I'm sat there, trying my best to make I fixed up a rental property, then spent 4 hours a night studying every day of the past couple months. Sound interesting? This happens almost every time. Theoretical physicists, accomplished sportsmen, artists, and a lot of medical students/professionals. Then me, a glorified white van man with aspirations on something I should have studied 7 years earlier, instead of going straight into the workforce with a forklift license. Constantly balancing their lifestyle expectations with your salary. I went through it as a 23-year-old making $42K in Manhattan. A carefree weekend without pre-gaming can blow your entire monthly discretionary income. Girl or boy, their most realistic fear is that anyone who shows interest in them is doing so only because of their money. That's why the more well-off someone is, the more low-key they are about it. Those who aren't low-key get devoured by human sharks very quickly. Make sure to like and subscribe for more daily content. Thanks for watching.